In 2018, Senate Democrats tried to pressure the FCC to use the public interest standard to stop Sinclair Broadcasting Group from acquiring Tribune Media. In 2023, leftists sought to stop a routine renewal of a Fox-owned broadcast station over complaints about 2020 election coverage. Do you agree that that was wrong?
Yes, Senator, I agree. And those are cases, in fact, where rather than following FCC precedent, the agency broke from it and did so in a weaponized way.
Now, another area of agreement between you and I is that Jimmy Kimmel is angry, overtly partisan, and profoundly unfunny. That, sadly, is true for most late-night comedians today who seem to have been collectively broken by President Trump's election. Jimmy's remarks about Charlie Kirk were tasteless, and ABC and its affiliates would have been fully within their rights to fire him or simply to no longer air his program. That was their choice. But what government cannot do is force private entities to take actions that the government cannot take directly. Government officials threatening adverse consequences for disfavored content is an unconstitutional coercion that chills protected speech. This is why it was so insidious how the Biden administration jawboned social media into shutting down conservatives online over accurate information on COVID or voter fraud. My Democrat colleagues were persistently silent over that scandal, but I welcome them now having discovered the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Democrat or Republican, we cannot have the government arbitrating truth or opinion. Mr. Chairman, my question is this. So long as there is a public interest standard, shouldn't it be understood to encompass robust First Amendment protections to ensure that the FCC cannot use it to chill speech?
Yes, Senator, I agree with you there. And I think the examples you laid out of weaponization during the Biden years are perfect examples. The Fox case you mentioned was a renewal for a broadcast TV license, and petitioners sought to have the FCC not renew it based on content that aired on a separate cable channel. In the cable context, it's entirely different. There's no license, there's no public interest standard. So first and foremost, we have to make sure the FCC is hewing to precedent. Similarly, we saw Democrats in Congress write letters to cable companies pressuring them to drop Fox News, OAN, and Newsmax because they disagreed with the political perspectives of those cable channels. And there, again, it was cable. No broadcast license, no public interest standard. So the FCC has to write within the four corners of our precedents to be consistent with the Communications Act and the First Amendment concerns as well.
All right, let's shift to spectrum. One of the biggest economic and national security wins in the Working Families Tax Cut Act was restoring the FCC's auction authority and creating the largest spectrum pipeline, 800 megahertz of spectrum, in U.S. history. It won't just bring faster and cheaper wireless to consumers, but it will keep the United States competitive in the global 6G race against Communist China. I'm encouraged that the FCC has already begun the process of freeing up potentially as much as 180 megahertz of C-band spectrum. Chairman Carr, is the Commission on track to meet the law's spectrum deadlines and to fully deliver on the bill's obligations?
Yes, Senator. And again, thank you to you for restoring the FCC's auction authority. We had fallen into a deep spectrum malaise during the Biden years. We were losing our leadership position. Right now, we're very actively working with our partners across government, Department of Transportation, FAA, NTIA, and we're all aligned to deliver on the statutory deadline of July 2027 for that auction.
And what will the benefits to consumers be of 800 megahertz of spectrum being made available for auction for the private sector?
First of all, this will allow us to catch back up to China. When President Trump left at the end of his Trump 45 administration, we had leapfrogged China and we're set up in a very good position. But then we didn't move forward with any new spectrum bands, and China moved ahead. So this is important for national security, but also for prices for consumers. The data shows when we free up more spectrum, we can allow providers, for instance, to compete for in-home broadband. And when they do that with fixed wireless, we've seen that cable modem prices drop by 37% where they used to have a monopoly. So it's good for our economy, for innovation, and for prices for consumers as well.
Commissioner Trusty, how does the spectrum auction pipeline and the Working Families Tax Cut help position the United States for success at the 2027 World Radio Conference?
Yes, thank you so much for the question, Senator, and thank you again for your leadership in restoring the FCC's General Spectrum Auction Authority and creating this long-term spectrum pipeline. I think these spectrum provisions are foundational to developing a unified strategy going into the next World Radio Communications Conference, where we can focus on key U.S. interests. We can work with our international allies in advance to preempt those who are seeking to undermine U.S. interests at the conference in Shanghai, China. In 2023, at the last World Radio Communications Conference, we didn't have this kind of legislative backing or support. We didn't have auction authority. We didn't have a long-term spectrum pipeline, and so we were sidelined on very important conversations. Now that we have this authority, thanks to your leadership, we can constructively and meaningfully engage in these conversations that I think position us better to come out of this conference with wins that are essential for our economic and national security and global leadership in next-generation communications technology.
In a consequential oversight hearing, a sharp spotlight was turned on the Federal Communications Commission regarding two of the most critical battlefields in modern governance, the preservation of First Amendment liberties online and the high-stakes technological race against China. Through targeted questioning directed at FCC Chairman Brendan Carr and the Commission, the interrogating senator laid out a clear defense of conservative speech while celebrating a major legislative victory for American wireless infrastructure. The opening salvo of the interrogation focused heavily on the historic weaponization of the FCC's public interest standard. The senator argued that left-wing actors have repeatedly tried to twist regulatory mechanisms to censor or punish conservative-leaning media outlets. The senator highlighted past instances of overreach, including a 2018 push by Senate Democrats to block Sinclair Broadcasting Group from an acquisition, and a 2023 effort to deny a routine license renewal for a Fox-owned station over its 2020 election coverage. Chairman Carr firmly agreed, labeling these actions as a weaponized departure from FCC precedent. While taking a sharp swipe at late-night host Jimmy Kimmel, calling his remarks about conservative activist Charlie Kirk tasteless and overtly partisan, the senator drew a hard constitutional line. While private networks have the right to fire hosts, the government cannot use back channels to force private entities to censor speech. Government officials threatening adverse consequences for disfavored content is an unconstitutional coercion that chills protected speech. This is why it was so insidious how the Biden administration jawboned social media into shutting down conservatives. Chairman Carr backed this view, pointing out that lawmakers had previously pressured cable providers to drop conservative networks like Fox News, OAN, and Newsmax simply because they disagreed with their political perspectives. Shifting from constitutional battles to macroeconomic strategy, the hearing highlighted the restoration of the FCC Spectrum Auction Authority via the Working Families Tax Cut Act. This legislation established an unprecedented 800 megahertz pipeline, the largest in U.S. history. According to Chairman Carr, the U.S. had fallen into a deep spectrum malaise during the Biden administration, allowing China to seize the lead in next-generation wireless development. This new pipeline is designed to reverse that trend. The hearing concluded by looking ahead to the international stage. The senator questioned Commissioner Trusty on how this massive newly secured spectrum pipeline alters America's standing before the upcoming 2027 World Radio Conference in Shanghai, China. Commissioner Trusty provided a candid assessment of past failures and future opportunities. She noted that at the 2023 conference, the U.S. was effectively sidelined because it lacked legislative backing, an active spectrum pipeline, or basic auction authority. With a new law in place, Trustee asserted that the U.S. finally has the foundation needed to build a unified strategy with international allies, allowing the nation to protect its economic interests and outmaneuver foreign adversaries seeking to dominate next-generation communication tech. Government must never act as an arbiter of truth or use regulatory muscle to chill speech. Simultaneously, true national security requires keeping the American economy competitive by slashing bureaucratic red tape, freeing up spectrum, and ensuring the U.S. beats China to the punch on 6G.